for solution for independence and the struggles. Hello everyone from Turkish Republic of Nothern Cyprus. My dear guest Kudret Özersay is with me to talk about the Cyprus. Welcome.
Thank you.
First of all, how would you explain the geopolitics position and political struggles of the Cyprus island until the 1974 Cyprus peace operation?
Before 1974, of course, if you look at the 1950s and 1960s, we can see a very critical position of the island of Cyprus, geopolitical position and in other aspects as well. For the United Kingdom, for example, who was one of the main and dominant actor of those years in this region, Cyprus was very important. They were using this island as a kind of a warship, and it was possible for them not only to make intervention via the island of Cyprus, via their aircrafts, but also by using the British sovereign bases on the island. They were collecting information and they were using the island of Cyprus and their facilities in these bases for intelligence purposes from the Middle East and from the Soviet Union as well. So as part of the struggle between East and West during 1940s, 50s, the island of Cyprus was very important. Even the operation of the UK forces towards Egypt was conducted via the island of Cyprus. So in that sense, it was very important. Because of the location of the island of Cyprus, generally the important actors of the region and of the world, they were putting their focus on the island of Cyprus, and they were taking care of what is going to happen in the Eastern Mediterranean. Therefore, generally, the involvement of the others outside the island has always been the case and has always been part of the history of Cyprus, the foreigners. Of course, Turkey is not a foreigner for us. I mean, as the motherland country for the Turkish Cypriots, as the previous administrator of the island of Cyprus Ottoman Empire, for the Turkish Cypriots, Turkey was very important. And also the independence struggle of Turkey and Mustafa Kemal Atatürk was also important for the Turkish Cypriots. And some of the Turkish Cypriot charity organizations, they collected some aid and money to send those struggling against the occupiers in Anatolia in the past. So there was that type of direct link with Turkey in the history of the Turkish Cypriot identity on this island. Basically, in 1920s, with the Treaty of Lausanne, when the Republic of Turkey was established basically and got its independence, and that independence accepted by the foreign countries, we see that Turkey lost the island of Cyprus with the Treaty of Lausanne in a way. And for that reason, the 1960 treaties concluded with UK, Greece, Turkey and the island of Cyprus was very critical for Turkey to become again an actor in Eastern Mediterranean region and regarding Cyprus. And for Turkish Cypriots again to be able to have that linkage with Turkey. In that sense, 1960 treaties and basically the Treaty of Guarantee was very important. As part of the decolonization process, not only in Cyprus but also in other parts of the world, mainly Africa and Middle East, most of the territories controlled and administered by the United Kingdom, they got their independence in 1960s. It started with India, Pakistan, and later on in some of the African territories, they got their independence, and also the island of Cyprus. In 1960, the island of Cyprus got its independence as part of a partnership between the Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots as co-founders of the 1960 Partnership Republic, bicommunal republic, and guaranteed, that republic was guaranteed by the Treaty of Guarantee, and it was a kind of a balance created between Turkey, Greece, UK, and the island of Cyprus for the stability in the Eastern Mediterranean region. Of course, with this linkage again created between Turkey and the island of Cyprus in 1974, because Greece conducted a military coup d'etat, and because Turkey exercised her rights under the Treaty of Guarantee, there was that military intervention conducted by Turkey, which ended up with the protection of the lives of the Turkish Cypriots, and which ended up with the collapse of a military coup d'etat conducted by the Greece in Cyprus, which also brought stability in the Greek Cypriot community as well, because there was a kind of a struggle between EOKA A and EOKA B groups, and which also triggered the collapse of the military administration in Athens in Greece as well. Therefore, until 1974, we can see the geopolitical position of the island of Cyprus not from the perspective of Cyprus or Eastern Mediterranean, but from the perspective of global politics and the politics with respect to Middle East. I think this can be the analysis about the position.
Okay. In this context, as far as I know from your life, you are a mother's child.
Yes.
As a result of the struggles on the Cyprus. Many Turkish Cypriot people like you lost their relatives because of this reason. How can you explain this psychological and social impacts on Turkish Cypriot people?
I'm not quite sure whether it is easy to explain these type of situations, particularly because if you are an affected person of those events, you may not assess it objectively. So I prefer to be impartial. I will try to be impartial. I think as a result of these intercommunal conflicts or events, struggle in the island of Cyprus, the main aim of a society or an identity plays a very critical role. If you look at the name of the organization created by the Turkish Cypriot community, it was TRNC, Türk Mukavemet Teşkilatı. It was mainly created on the basis of the idea of defense, resistance, defense, not attack someone. If you look at the idea of the identity of the Greek Cypriot community, the ultimate aim of the idea was to unite the island with Greece. Of course, for that reason, most probably, they saw, or they generally see the Turkish Cypriot community. I'm not talking about the personal relations between Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots in different villages. There are good memories as well, but as a society, the Greek Cypriot community considered Turkish Cypriot community as an obstacle against their ultimate aim, Megaleida, the main aim of uniting Ireland with Greece. And for that reason, some of the terrorist organizations, they conducted operations against the Turkish Cypriots. There have been many missing Turkish Cypriots during that period. There have been too many checkpoints. It was not possible for the Turkish Cypriots to travel all around the island. The Turkish Cypriots were unfortunately forced to live in 3% of the total land area of the island between 1963 and 1974. For 11 years, more than 100 Turkish Cypriot villages were destroyed by the Greek Cypriot terrorist organizations. So for that reason, my father and some of our relatives as well, they were members of the Turkish resistance organizations, and they were trained for defending their villages, defending their society, their community. That was the main logic. In 1974, when the Turkish military operation was conducted, because of the geographic position, it was conducted from the north. However, our village was located in the south. So, in the first part of the operation, those villages in Limassol, in Larnaca, and those Turkish Cypriots living in those villages, it was not possible for them to resist. So their struggle was in a way lost. Some of them were captured, some of them were killed. Unfortunately, our family, most of the men in the family, after they were captured as a result of that armed exchange, they were laid in front of a wall and they were executed. And that was a violation of the laws of war, even. Because even during the war, there are rules that you have to respect. After after the end of the armed conflict, you cannot capture someone and then execute those people. So they were killed and they're martyrs, but they were not buried. They were all put in the same place. After many years, in 2016, the exhumation started as a result of the Committee on Missing Persons activities, and they were identified. And in 2007, we brought them to North. After the DNA tests, they were identified, and we buried them according to our religious rules. It was a trauma. It was a trauma for me as a person, because when my father was executed, I was 6 months old, even less than 1 year. It was a trauma for my family. Most of the members of the family, they got the assistance of an expert on psychology after that operation took place. It was also a trauma for the society, because after more than 30 years, some martyrs were brought again and buried again in a way. I felt that it is true in 1974 the island, in 1963 the island was started to be separated and divided. In 1974 the bizonal character of the island of Cyprus was physically created, but in 2007 and afterwards, when we started to even brought our martyrs to the place, to the country that we live, I think we started to experience the reality that whatever partnership we are going to create on this island, it will have a bizonal character. It's not going to be, the mixed multicultural or living together in the same villages, in the same streets and small residential areas, together with the Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots as community. This will not going to happen anymore. Even if you take your martyr after more than 30 years and bring it back to the place that you live, this was a sign for me for the real separation of the two communities. Again, I would like to stress that I don't feel, I don't see the Greek Cypriots as enemies, to be honest, because I always believe in the principle of Mustafa Kemal Atatürk regarding peace. And for that reason, you may have direct good relations with the Greek Cypriots personally, but as a community, I think the Turkish Cypriot community is very sensitive and will continue to be very sensitive about its relations with the Greek Cypriot community, because creating an identity here, then building a state on that, and maintaining this identity and the Turkish Cypriot identity on this island in future will be one of the main aim of the Turkish Cypriot community and the Turkish Cypriot people. And I'm in politics now for this purpose, not only as a person, but also as a political movement. What we are aiming is to create a state which is a modern state following the principles of Mustafa Kemal Atatürk.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.